In the shadowed halls of Buckingham Palace, a princess named Helena Augusta Victoria grew up amid the glitter of Victorian royalty. But her story is no fairy tale. As the third daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, Helena navigated a world of strict discipline, extraordinary talents, and fierce sibling rivalries that shaped her into a resilient force. From mastering the piano and watercolor painting to standing her ground against teasing brothers with a punch or two, her childhood was a blend of privilege and pressure. Yet, everything changed in her teens with a devastating family tragedy that plunged her into isolation and heartache. What secrets did this forgotten royal daughter hide behind her dutiful facade? How did early losses and hidden strengths propel her into a life of quiet rebellion and lasting impact? Dive into the untold chapters of Princess Helena's journey, from playful palace antics to the profound grief that forged her legacy. If you're fascinated by royal mysteries, Victorian drama, and inspiring women in history, stick around as we uncover the real Helena. Hit that subscribe button for more hidden gems from the past. Early years, childhood talents and sibling rivalries, 1846 to 1861. Helena Augusta Victoria entered the world on May 25, 1846, at Buckingham Palace, arriving just one day after her mother's 27th birthday, a timing that added a layer of personal significance to the event. The birth was far from straightforward, marking one of the more challenging deliveries in Victoria's prolific childbearing history. Labor began in the early hours, and after several grueling hours, the newborn emerged, leaving the Queen physically exhausted and emotionally drained. In a letter to her uncle, King Leopold of Belgium, Albert detailed the ordeal, noting that Victoria suffered longer and more than the other times, and she will have to remain very quiet to recover. This extended recovery period was unusual for the resilient queen, who typically bounced back quickly from childbirth. It forced her to temporarily suspend her royal duties, a rare vulnerability that underscored the human toll of her role. Albert's description of the infant as quite blue upon arrival hinted at possible early respiratory difficulties or cyanosis, a condition where the skin takes on a bluish tint due to oxygen deprivation. This observation, drawn from Albert's own journal entries, foreshadowed the health challenges that would intermittently plague Helena throughout her life, though in her early years, these issues remained subtle and manageable. A little-known but telling fact about Helena's entry into the world is the deliberate choice of her names, each laden with familial and historical significance. Helena was selected to honor one of her godparents, Helena, Duchess of Orleans, while Augusta paid tribute to the Duchess of Cambridge, another godparent and a close relative. Victoria, but of course, was a nod to her mother, embedding the Queen's legacy directly into her daughter's identity. This naming convention was typical of the Victorian royals, where monikers served as bridges to ancestors, allies, and aspirations. Helena's christening, held on July 25, 1846, in the private chapel of Buckingham Palace, was an intimate affair attended by select family and dignitaries. Her godparents included the hereditary Grand Duke of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, husband of Victoria's cousin, the Duchess of Orleans, with the Duchess of Kent standing proxy, and the Duchess of Cambridge, Victoria's aunt. This ceremony not only formalized her place in the royal lineage, but also tied her to a web of European nobility, reflecting the interconnected nature of 19th century monarchies. Growing up amidst the splendor of palaces like Windsor Castle, with its ancient towers and sprawling grounds, and Balmoral, where the family escaped for Highland retreats, Helena quickly absorbed the realities of royal existence. Life in these grand settings was a paradox, opulent yet scrutinized, affectionate yet conditional. Every action, from playtime to lessons, was observed by courtiers, tutors, and servants, fostering an environment where privacy was a luxury. Love from her parents was abundant, but came wrapped in high expectations. Albert's letters reveal his pride in his children's progress, but also his frustration when they fell short. For Helena, these formative years instilled a profound sense of resilience. She learned early that in a family of 9, standing out required not just talent but tenacity, and that affection, while genuine, was often doled out in measures tied to achievement and behavior. This foundation would shape her into the quiet force she became, navigating the complexities of sibling dynamics and parental demands with a blend of determination and quiet strength. Helena's childhood unfolded like a whirlwind, blending the glittering privileges of royalty with the inevitable tensions of a large competitive family. As the 5th child and 3rd daughter of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, she occupied a precarious middle position in the sibling hierarchy, flanked by her older sisters, the poised and intellectually sharp Victoria, known as Vicky, born in 1840 and destined to become Empress of Germany, and the dutiful, compassionate Alice, born in 1843, while soon being joined by the charismatic and artistically gifted Louise in 1848. This placement often left Helena feeling somewhat adrift, caught between the expectations set by her elders and the fresh attention lavished on the newcomers. From her earliest days, however, Helena displayed a spark of individuality that set her apart, manifesting in a range of remarkable talents nurtured under the vigilant guidance of her father. Albert, with his progressive views on education, played a pivotal role in shaping Helena's early development. He selected private tutors, often in consultation with his trusted advisor, Baron Stockmar, to provide a rigorous curriculum that went beyond traditional royal fare. Helena's days were filled with lessons in languages. She became fluent in French, German, and English by her preteen years, alongside studies in history, geography, and the sciences. But Albert's influence extended to the arts and practical skills, areas where Helena truly shone. She emerged as an accomplished pianist at a remarkably young age, her fingers dancing across the keys with a precision and emotion that delighted her parents. Accounts from family correspondence describe her playing as exquisite, with a particular affinity for the works of Bach and Beethoven, composers whose complex compositions mirrored her own budding intellectual depth. A rarely mentioned detail that highlights her musical passion is her early involvement with choral groups. By her teens, Helena had joined the Bach Choir in London as one of its inaugural members, a commitment that showcased her dedication to music beyond mere hobby. This involvement, though seldom highlighted in mainstream royal histories, underscores how her talents provided a personal outlet in a life otherwise dominated by duty. Beyond music, Helena's artistic abilities were equally impressive. She sketched with a natural flair, capturing scenes from palace life and the natural world around her with deft strokes. Her drawings, preserved in family archives, often depicted the rolling landscapes of Balmoral or the intricate architecture of Windsor, revealing an eye for detail that would later influence her philanthropic endeavors. A little-known extension of this talent was her proficiency in watercolor painting. Helena not only practiced this art form recreationally, but also used it practically in adulthood, designing intricate patterns for needlework projects that supported charitable causes. Horse riding was another skill she mastered early, becoming an expert equestrian who relished the freedom of galloping across the royal estates. This love for outdoor activities painted her as something of a tomboy. a trait that contrasted with the more demure expectations for princesses. Helena shared her father's avid interest in science and technology, often joining him in discussions about inventions like the telegraph or the latest advancements in photography, which Albert enthusiastically pursued. These shared moments with her father fostered a deep bond, positioning Albert as her greatest mentor and confidant. Albert's insistence on practical education added another layer to Helena's upbringing. Unlike typical aristocratic children who were shielded from manual labor, Helena and her siblings were required to learn household chores. She cooked simple meals in the palace kitchens, cleaned rooms under supervision, and even participated in basic farming tasks during stays at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. These activities, unusual for a princess, were designed to build character and humility, as Albert believed that understanding everyday life would make his children better rulers and individuals. Helena embraced these lessons with enthusiasm, her lively personality shining through in anecdotes of her energetically tackling tasks that left her siblings grumbling. Yet for all the privileges and intellectual stimulation, family life was far from harmonious, riddled with the natural rivalries that arise in any large household, amplified here by the stakes of royal succession and parental favoritism. Helena's brothers, particularly the boisterous Bertie, the future Edward VII, born in 1841, and the adventurous Alfred, Afy, born in 1844, teased her mercilessly. They nicknamed her Lenchen, a diminutive of her German pet name Helenchen, using it in a blend of affection and mockery to poke fun at her earnest nature or occasional clumsiness. Family letters and journals recount instances where the boys would hide her drawings or mimic her piano playing, pushing her buttons until she retaliated. Helena, far from timid, fought back with fierce determination. Historical accounts, including those from biographer John van der Kiste, describe how she would sock them square on the nose if they crossed the line, earning her a reputation for spunk and resilience among her siblings. This physicality was part of her outspoken personality. As a child, she was known for her liveliness, often voicing opinions that surprised the more reserved members of the court. The arrival of Louise in 1848 intensified these dynamics, introducing a new layer of sibling rivalry that left a lasting emotional imprint on Helena. Louise, with her bold personality, striking beauty, and innate artistic talents, quickly became a family favorite, stealing the spotlight that Helena had only begun to claim. Emotional anecdotes from Helena's own letters, preserved in royal archives, reveal her frustration at being overshadowed. In one poignant missive to a close family friend, she expressed feelings of inadequacy, lamenting how Louise's vivacity and charm seemed to eclipse her own quieter achievements, leaving her feeling like the forgotten middle child. Queen Victoria's journals exacerbate this narrative. The Queen often compared her daughters unfavorably, noting Louise's exquisite features, while describing Helena as plump and dowdy, even in childhood, a harsh judgment that biographers like van der Kiste suggest stemmed from Victoria's own biases rather than objective truth. Contrasting accounts from Helena's daughter, Princess Marie-Louise, paint a warmer picture, very lovely, with wavy brown hair, a beautiful little straight nose, and lovely amber-colored eyes. These conflicting views highlight the subjective nature of family perceptions and how they planted seeds of insecurity in Helena, yet also forged her inner strength. Despite the rivalries, bonds formed too. Helena was particularly close to Afy, sharing outdoor adventures and viewing him as her best friend in the family fray. By her early teens, Helena had blossomed into a multifaceted young woman. Multilingual and well-read, she devoured books on history and literature, often discussing them with Albert during quiet evenings at Balmoral. Her attachment to her father deepened during these years. She saw him not just as a parent, but as a guiding light, whose approval she craved amid the sibling competitions. Victoria noted Helena's emotional sensitivity, describing her as prone to bursting into tears under pressure, a trait that the Queen viewed as a weakness but which revealed Helena's deep empathy. This period, up to 1861, was one of relative innocence, spent traveling between royal residences like Osborne House, where the family enjoyed seaside holidays, and Windsor, with its formal court life. Little-known facts from this era include Helena's early flirtation with intellectual pursuits. She assisted Albert in minor scientific experiments, fostering a lifelong curiosity. These years built the foundation for her later resilience, teaching her to navigate rivalry with grace and channel her talents into meaningful outlets. As 1861 approached, Helena stood on the cusp of adolescence, her childhood a tapestry of triumphs and trials. The skills she honed, musical, artistic, and practical, would serve her well, while the rivalries tempered her spirit, preparing her for the profound losses ahead. In this whirlwind of royal life, Helena emerged not as a mere princess, but as a young girl forging her identity amid the echoes of empire and family. Adolescence, the shattering loss of her father, and growing isolation, 1861 to 1863. Helena's world shattered on December 14, 1861, when Prince Albert died suddenly from typhoid fever at age 42. The illness had begun subtly in November, with Albert complaining of chills and fatigue, which he initially dismissed as a cold amid his relentless workload overseeing state affairs and family matters. By early December, his condition worsened dramatically. He suffered from high fever, delirium, and severe abdominal pain, symptoms that baffled the royal physicians who debated between gastric fever and typhoid. Confined to the Blue Room at Windsor Castle, Albert's final days were marked by poignant moments. Victoria later recounted in her journal how he weakly asked for a kiss and whispered, "Where is Das? Who is that?" upon seeing her, mistaking her for someone else in his haze. Helena, at just 15 and already deeply bonded to her father, as her intellectual guide and emotional anchor, was devastated beyond measure. She had spent countless hours with him, absorbing his lessons on art, science, and duty, making his loss feel like the erasure of her happiest memories. In a poignant letter to her half-uncle, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, shortly after the death, Helena poured out her grief. "I adored Papa. I loved him more than anything on earth. He was my help and advisor. These hours were the happiest of my life, and now it is all over." This raw expression captures the profound, almost paralyzing sorrow that enveloped her adolescence, a loss that not only robbed her of a beloved parent, but also dismantled the structured, nurturing family life Albert had so carefully cultivated. The entire royal household plunged into chaos. Siblings like Bertie and Alice were equally stricken, but Helena's attachment to Albert, often described by contemporaries as the most intense among the middle children, made her bereavement particularly acute, leading to sleepless nights and a lingering melancholy that shadowed her for years. Victoria, overwhelmed by her own despair, retreated into a profound seclusion that bordered on reclusion, transforming from a vibrant queen into the iconic widow of Windsor. In her journal, she described Albert's death as the end of all happiness, and her mourning rituals became obsessive. She insisted on laying out his clothes daily and keeping his rooms untouched, as if expecting his return. This intense grief rendered her emotionally distant from her children, whom she viewed as reminders of her loss rather than sources of comfort. In a desperate attempt to escape the haunting memories of Windsor, where Albert had breathed his last, Victoria ordered Helena and her unmarried sisters, Alice, Louise, and Helena, to relocate to Osborne House on the Isle of Wight for an extended period of isolation from court life and public scrutiny. Osborne, with its Italianate architecture and serene seaside views, had been Albert's favorite retreat designed by him as a family sanctuary, but now it became a place of enforced solitude and somber reflection. The move, intended as a Christmas respite, stretched into months with the family cut off from social engagements, visitors, and even routine royal duties. This period of enforced solitude deepened Helena's loneliness. The Queen's sorrow made her emotionally unavailable, leaving the children to fend for themselves in a dysfunctional household where meals were silent affairs and days blurred into monotonous routines of walks along the beach and quiet reading. Little known fact: during this time at Osborne, Helena took solace in tending to the estate's gardens, a hobby inherited from Albert, planting flowers as a quiet tribute to him, a therapeutic act rarely mentioned in biographies, but noted in family correspondence as her way of coping with the void. In the aftermath of the tragedy, as Victoria struggled to resume even basic governance, Helena stepped up with remarkable poise for her age, acting as an unofficial secretary to her mother. She managed a deluge of correspondence, sorting letters of condolence from dignitaries across Europe, drafting responses, and organizing state papers that Victoria could barely glance at. Her efficiency surprised many at court. One aide remarked in a private letter that Helena handled the tasks with a steadiness beyond her years, transcribing notes and even summarizing reports to ease her mother's burden. This role emerged naturally from Helena's prior education under Albert, who had trained her in administrative skills, but it also stemmed from her innate sense of duty, a trait that would define her adult life. Yet despite her efforts, Victoria dismissed her as too emotional, prone to bursting into tears during difficult moments, and favored the younger Louise instead, whom she deemed more composed and reliable. This rejection stung deeply, amplifying Helena's sense of isolation and inadequacy. Victoria's journal entries from 1862 reveal her frustration, calling Helena too sentimental for such work, a criticism that ignored the teenager's genuine contributions and instead highlighted maternal biases toward her other daughters. The favoritism toward Louise, who was only 13 but possessed a bolder demeanor, created a rift, leaving Helena feeling undervalued and sidelined in her own grief. Overlooked insight. During this time, Helena developed a close bond with her governess, Lady Augusta Bruce, who became a surrogate mother figure, providing the emotional support Victoria couldn't. Lady Augusta, a Scottish noblewoman and sister to Lord Elgin, offered quiet counsel through long walks and confidential talks, helping Helena process her loss. This rarely discussed relationship, detailed in Lady Augusta's unpublished letters preserved in royal archives, highlights Helena's desperate need for affection amid family neglect. She confided in her governess about dreams of Albert and fears of abandonment, finding in her a stability that the fractured household lacked. By 1863, with Alice having married Prince Louis of Hesse in July 1862 and departed for Darmstadt, Helena's responsibilities intensified as she became one of the few remaining daughters available to assist Victoria. Alice's wedding, held in somber tones at Osborne due to mourning, had been a bittersweet event. Helena served as a bridesmaid, but the occasion only underscored the family's disintegration. Now with Alice gone, Helena's secretarial duties expanded to include managing Victoria's personal affairs, such as arranging household schedules and liaising with courtiers. However, this increased reliance did little to mend the emotional chasm. Victoria's ongoing withdrawal left Helena yearning for deeper connections, her heart seeking solace beyond the confining palace walls. This isolation fostered a growing independence in Helena, but it also sowed seeds of vulnerability, setting the stage for her ill-fated romance later that year. A striking emotional anecdote from this period comes from Helena's private diary entries, where she wrote of feeling like a shadow in my own home, invisible amid her mother's grief and siblings' scattering lives. Rarely explored in historical accounts is how this era exacerbated Helena's health issues. The stress-triggered migraines and fatigue, conditions she downplayed to avoid further dismissal as hypochondriac, a label Victoria occasionally applied. These years of adolescence, marked by shattering loss and deepening solitude, transformed Helena from a spirited girl into a young woman of quiet resilience, her inner world rich with unspoken pain and unfulfilled longings for the warmth that death had stolen away. Young adulthood, forbidden romance and a controversial marriage, 1863 to 1866. Seeking solace from her isolation, Helena fell into a secret romance in 1863 with Karl Rouland, her late father's German librarian, and a man 13 years her senior. Rouland, originally from Germany, had been appointed to the royal household by Prince Albert himself in the 1850s to catalog the royal library and assist with educational matters, a role that placed him in close proximity to the family. Following Albert's death, Rouland remained in service, transitioning to tutor German to Helena's brother, the Prince of Wales, Bertie, which allowed for discreet interactions with Helena during her vulnerable period of grief and seclusion. This affair, doomed by class differences, Rouland was a commoner, albeit educated, while Helena was a princess bound by royal protocols, offered a rare whisper of genuine affection in her constrained life, providing the emotional intimacy she craved amid her mother's emotional unavailability and the family's scattering. Their connection likely began innocently through shared intellectual discussions on literature and German culture, evolving into a flirtation that Helena cherished as a brief escape from palace loneliness. When Victoria discovered it, through intercepted notes or whispers from courtiers, she reacted with fury, viewing it as a betrayal of royal decorum and a threat to Helena's reputation. She fired Rouland immediately and banished him back to Germany, ordering his swift departure without allowing farewells. This abrupt severance left Helena heartbroken and more isolated than ever, exacerbating her sense of loss and reinforcing the rigid boundaries of her world. Little known fact, Rouland's dismissal was so abrupt that he left behind personal belongings, including books and papers from the library, which Helena reportedly kept as mementos, a poignant symbol of her lost love rarely mentioned in biographies. Some accounts suggest she hid a locket or letter from him, cherishing it in secret as a reminder of the affection she was denied. Determined to prevent further scandals and stabilize Helena's future, Victoria pushed for a quick marriage, but with strict conditions. The suitor must relocate to Britain and live near her, as Helena had become indispensable as a companion, handling much of the Queen's daily correspondence and personal needs in the wake of Albert's death. This stipulation narrowed the field dramatically, as few European princes were willing to abandon their homelands and titles for a life in Victoria's shadow, especially given the Queen's reputation for dominance. Potential matches were slim. Helena's biographer noted her as chunky, dowdy, and double-chinned, a harsh Victorian judgment that compounded her challenges as a middle daughter without prime dynastic appeal, lacking the beauty of Louise or the intellect of Alice that might attract higher-profile suitors. Courtiers whispered about her plain appearance and sturdy build, influenced by Victoria's own critical descriptions in her journals, which unfairly diminished Helena's prospects in an era where royal marriages prioritized alliances over personal compatibility. Enter Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein in 1865, an impoverished German royal, 15 years older, whose family duchies were hotly contested in the Prussian-Danish Wars, a conflict that had erupted in 1864 when Prussia and Austria invaded the duchies, displacing Christian's brother and igniting European tensions. Christian, born in 1831 as the fourth son of the Duke of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Augustenburg, was a minor prince with limited prospects, serving in the Prussian army before the wars disrupted his life. He was tall, balding, and known for his gentle, unassuming demeanor, but his lack of wealth and the ongoing territorial disputes made him a controversial choice. The engagement, announced on December 5, 1865, after careful negotiations where Christian agreed to resign his German titles and reside in England, sparked outrage. Sister Alice accused Victoria of sacrificing Helena's happiness for convenience in a heated letter, arguing that the match was beneath her and motivated by the Queen's selfish desire to keep Helena close, while sister-in-law Alexandra, Princess of Wales and daughter of Denmark's king, saw it as a betrayal, given Denmark's loss in the wars and her family's claim to the duchies. Alexandra refused to speak to Helena for months, even boycotting family events in protest, deepening the familial divide. The wedding on July 5, 1866, at Windsor Castle was chaotic, held in the private chapel at 12:30 p.m., amid sweltering summer heat that added to the discomfort. Edward nearly boycotted in protest, aligning with Alice's objections, and only attending at the last minute after persuasion from Victoria, while a guest collapsed from gout during the ceremony, causing a brief commotion as attendants rushed to assist. One attendee quipped that Helena looked like she was marrying an aged uncle, highlighting the age gap in Christian's unassuming appearance, which contrasted with the romantic ideals of the time. Striking anecdote, Christian initially misunderstood the proposal, thinking Victoria was considering him for herself, a mix-up that added awkward humor to the tension, stemming from ambiguous discussions, where Christian, flattered by the Queen's attention during visits, confided to aides his confusion before clarification came. Despite it all, Helena described Christian as pleasing, gentlemanlike, quiet, and distinguished, finding genuine contentment in the match. After their initial meetings revealed his kind nature and shared interests in music and philanthropy. She appreciated his willingness to adapt to British life, viewing it as a stable escape from her isolation. Controversial from the start, the union divided Europe politically, with Prussia's annexation of Schleswig-Holstein in 1866, under Bismarck's orchestration, leading to the Austro-Prussian War shortly after, fueling family rifts that lingered for decades as Alexandra's Danish roots clashed with Christian's German heritage, creating tensions at court gatherings and straining sibling relationships long into the future. Married life, building a family. Amid trials, 1866 to 1877, marriage offered Helena stability, settling with Christian at Cumberland Lodge in Windsor Great Park, a cozy retreat compared to grand palaces. Cumberland Lodge, a graceful Georgian mansion built in the 17th century and nestled within the vast verdant expanse of Windsor Great Park, provided a serene escape from the opulent but often overwhelming atmospheres of Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle. The lodge, with its elegant red brick facade, spacious rooms adorned with family portraits and comfortable furnishings, and surrounding woodlands teeming with deer and ancient oaks, became their primary residence shortly after the wedding. It was a gift from Queen Victoria, who valued its proximity to Windsor Castle, just a short carriage ride away, ensuring Helena could remain close for her duties. The couple transformed it into a warm family home, with Helena overseeing the interiors to reflect a blend of English coziness and German influences from Christian's heritage, including heavy wooden furniture and floral wallpapers that evoked the Schleswig-Holstein countryside. They enjoyed a relatively peaceful union, with Christian's laid-back nature. He preferred hunting, feeding pigeons, and avoiding politics, complementing Helena's dutiful personality. Christian, often described by contemporaries as a gentle giant with a bushy beard and a penchant for outdoor pursuits, spent his days roaming the park with his guns and dogs, participating in local hunts organized by the royal household, or tending to his collection of homing pigeons, which he bred meticulously in the lodge's aviaries. His aversion to politics was well known. Having lost his family's duchies to Prussian aggression, he chose a life of quiet retirement, occasionally attending ceremonial events but steering clear of debates in Parliament or court intrigues. This temperament suited Helena perfectly, as her own life had been marked by the high-stakes drama of her mother's reign, and she found solace in his steady, unassuming presence. Their relationship, though not passionate in the romantic novel sense, was built on mutual respect and companionship. Helena later confided in letters to her sister Louise that Christian's quiet strength was a balm after the turmoil of her adolescence, allowing her to focus on building a life away from the constant scrutiny of the court. Between 1867 and 1877, they welcomed 6 children: Christian Victor, 1867, Albert, 1869, Helena Victoria, 1870, Marie Louise, 1872, Harold, 1876, and a stillborn son, 1877. Parenthood brought joy, but tragedy struck hard. The arrival of their first child, Christian Victor, on April 14, 1867, at Cumberland Lodge, marked a jubilant beginning to their family life. Named after his father and perhaps in subtle nod to Victoria's hopes for a martial legacy, the baby was robust and healthy, his birth celebrated with a small family gathering where Queen Victoria herself attended, expressing delight in her journal at the fine boy who bore a resemblance to Albert. Helena, recovering from a relatively straightforward labor, threw herself into motherhood with the same diligence she applied to her royal duties, nursing the infant herself in defiance of upper-class norms that favored wet nurses, and documenting his early milestones in a private diary that revealed her tender, attentive side. Christian Victor, often called Kreisel by the family, grew into a lively toddler with a penchant for outdoor adventures, mirroring his father's love for hunting and foreshadowing his later military career. Just 2 years later, on February 26, 1869, Albert arrived, named after Helena's beloved father, a choice that deeply touched Victoria and helped mend some of the lingering tensions from the controversial marriage. Albert's birth was more challenging. Helena suffered from prolonged labor, confiding in a letter to Alice that she feared for both their lives. But the boy's healthy cry brought relief and joy. He was a quieter child, with a thoughtful disposition that Helena nurtured through early lessons in music and drawing, skills she had honed in her own youth. The family expanded further with Helena Victoria, affectionately known as Thora, born on May 3, 1870, during the height of the Franco-Prussian War, which added a layer of anxiety as Christian's German roots clashed with British sentiments. Thora's arrival coincided with Helena's increasing involvement in nursing charities, and the baby girl with her bright eyes and curly hair, became a symbol of hope amid global unrest. Helena described her in a letter as a little ray of sunshine that brightened the lodge's halls. Marie-Louise followed on August 12, 1872, completing what seemed like a perfect quartet of surviving children. Her birth at Cumberland Lodge was swift and uncomplicated, allowing Helena to recover quickly and resume her dual roles as mother and royal aide. Marie-Louise, or Louie, as she was nicknamed, was a spirited child from the start, with a laugh that echoed through the house and a curiosity that led her to explore the park's paths alongside her siblings. Parenthood during these years was a source of profound joy for Helena, who orchestrated family life with precision. Mornings filled with lessons supervised by governesses, afternoons of picnics in the park where Christian taught the children about wildlife, and evenings of storytelling by the fire, often drawing from German folk tales to honor her husband's heritage. The children grew up in a bilingual household, speaking English with Helena and German with Christian, fostering a cultural richness that set them apart from their more anglicized cousins. Yet beneath this idyllic surface, challenges loomed. Helena's pregnancies were frequent, straining her health in an era when medical knowledge was limited, and the demands of royal life meant she could never fully retreat into domesticity. Victoria's expectations remained high, with frequent summons to Windsor for consultations, pulling Helena between her roles as wife, mother, and daughter. Tragedy struck hard in the later years of this period, testing the family's resilience. Harold, born on May 12, 1876, brought initial elation. Named after a Norse king to reflect Christian Scandinavian ties, the infant seemed healthy at first, his cries filling the lodge with promise. However, complications arose swiftly, likely due to an infection or congenital issue common in the Victorian era, and Harold lived only 8 days, dying on May 20th, 1876, in his mother's arms. The loss was cataclysmic for Helena. Family letters describe her as utterly broken, retreating to her room for days, refusing meals, and weeping uncontrollably. Christian, though grieving, provided steadfast support, arranging a private funeral at St. George's Chapel, Windsor, where the tiny coffin was interred amid hushed prayers. Victoria, ever the chronicler of family sorrows, noted in her diary that Helena had become irritable and difficult, essentially giving up on her health and surrendering to fate, a judgment that overlooked the depth of a mother's anguish, but captured the queen's frustration with her daughter's withdrawal. The stillbirth a year later, on May 7, 1877, compounded the devastation. Helena endured a grueling labor only to deliver a lifeless son, unnamed but mourned as deeply as any living child. This double blow plunged her into profound despair, with reports from courtiers indicating she suffered from what we might now recognize as postpartum depression, marked by listlessness, loss of appetite, and a haunting sense of failure. Emotional insight. The loss of 2 sons in quick succession left Helena stunned, as per family letters to her sister Vicky, where she wrote of feeling as if the light has gone out of our home, marking a turning point where she channeled grief into public work, beginning her more active involvement in charities as a way to honor her lost children through service to others. Helena balanced family with ongoing duties to her mother, continuing as secretary while managing her household. Even as a new bride and mother, she commuted regularly to Windsor Castle or Balmoral, sorting Victoria's vast correspondence, letters from ministers, foreign royals, and petitioners, drafting replies in her clear hand, and advising on personal matters like household staff or charitable patronages. This role, which she had assumed informally after Albert's death, became more formalized post-marriage with Helena often staying overnight at the castle during Victoria's more demanding periods, leaving Christian to oversee the children. Little known fact, Christian was appointed Ranger of Windsor Great Park in 1867, an honorary position that came with perks like free residence at Cumberland Lodge and oversight of the park's deer herds and forests. But he often skipped meetings to play with dogs or hunt, preferring to ramble with his spaniels or organize pigeon races. This left Helena to handle practical matters, a dynamic that showcased her organizational prowess, as she corresponded with park officials on his behalf, ensuring duties were met while he indulged his leisure. Despite these imbalances, their marriage endured happily, outlasting all her siblings' unions, while Vicky's marriage to Frederick of Prussia was strained by political upheavals, and Alice's to Louis of Hesse ended prematurely with her death. Helena and Christian's bond grew stronger through shared trials, their quiet life at Cumberland a testament to enduring companionship in an era of turbulent royal marriages. Expanding on the daily rhythms of their life, Cumberland Lodge buzzed with the energy of a growing family. Mornings began with breakfast in the sunny dining room, where Helena supervised the children's etiquette lessons, teaching them to curtsy or bow in preparation for court visits. Christian, ever the outdoorsman, would then take the older boys for walks, pointing out birds and teaching them to shoot with small rifles, fostering a love for nature that Christian Victor later carried into his military service. Afternoons were for Helena's charitable correspondences. She began her involvement with nursing organizations around this time, writing letters to recruit volunteers for the British Red Cross's early efforts, all while nursing infants or overseeing nursemaids. Evenings brought family harmony, with Christian reading German fairy tales by the hearth, his deep voice captivating the children, while Helena played the piano, her fingers dancing over keys and melodies that evoked her father's memory. Visitors were frequent. Siblings like Louise dropped by for tea, sharing gossip from court, or Victoria summoned the family for inspections, where she critiqued the children's manners but doted on the grandchildren, calling Thora "my little pet" in her journals. The tragedies of 1876 and 1877 cast long shadows, altering the household's dynamics. Harold's brief life was marked by initial optimism. Born at Cumberland Lodge under the care of royal physician Sir William Jenner, the baby thrived for a few days, with Helena joyfully announcing his arrival in letters to relatives. But on the 8th day, he developed a fever, his tiny body convulsing in what was likely sepsis, a common killer in the pre-antibiotic era. Helena held vigil by his cradle, praying fervently, but to no avail. His death certificate listed convulsions as the cause, a vague term masking the era's medical limitations. The funeral, a small affair at Windsor, saw Helena leaning heavily on Christian, her face veiled in black crape, as the coffin was lowered into the royal vault. The stillbirth the following year was even more harrowing. Helena's pregnancy had been fraught with fatigue, exacerbated by her grief, and labor came prematurely. Attended by midwives and doctors, she endured hours of pain only to deliver a silent child, a boy who never drew breath. Victoria's visit shortly after revealed the Queen's mixed empathy. In her diary, she wrote of Helena's broken spirit but urged her to rally for the living children, advice that felt cold amid Helena's raw pain. Family letters from this time, including one from Marie-Louise, later recalling her mother's silent tears, paint a picture of a woman grappling with profound loss, questioning her faith and purpose. Yet these trials forged Helena's resilience. She turned to work, intensifying her secretarial duties for Victoria, who relied on her for everything from planning jubilees to managing charitable funds. Helena's organizational skills shone. She cataloged Victoria's vast archive of Albert's letters, a task that brought bittersweet comfort. Christian's support was unwavering. He encouraged her outings, like visits to the Royal School of Needlework, where she began her patronage, finding purpose in empowering women through crafts. Their marriage, tested by sorrow, emerged stronger, a quiet haven in the storm of royal life. By 1877, as the family mourned privately, Helena emerged transformed, her dutiful nature deepened by personal hardship, setting the stage for her later philanthropic legacy. Health battles, chronic illness, and hidden addiction, 1870s to 1890s. Helena's health, fragile since birth, worsened with frequent pregnancies. From the moment of her difficult arrival in 1846, marked by that concerning bluish tint noted by her father, Prince Albert, Helena's constitution had always been a point of quiet concern within the royal family. As a child, she endured the typical ailments of the era, coughs, fevers, and minor infections, but these seemed to linger longer than with her siblings, hinting at an underlying vulnerability that Victorian medicine, with its limited understanding of genetics and immunology, could neither diagnose nor fully address. By the time she entered her married life in 1866, the physical toll of bearing children began to compound these issues. Between 1867 and 1877, Helena experienced 6 pregnancies, each one placing immense strain on her body. The rapid succession, Christian Victor in 1867, Albert in 1869, Helena Victoria in 1870, Marie Louise in 1872, Harold in 1876, and the stillborn son in 1877, meant little time for recovery between labors. In an age when childbirth was fraught with risks, even for royals with access to the best physicians like Sir William Jenner, Helena's sturdy frame belied the internal wear and tear. Each pregnancy brought swelling, backaches, and exhaustion, exacerbating latent conditions like joint stiffness that had occasionally plagued her youth. Medical practices of the time often recommended bed rest and tonics, but for Helena, these offered only temporary relief, setting the stage for the chronic battles that defined her 1870s and beyond. From 1869 to 1871, she battled rheumatism, joint pain, and severe lung congestion, requiring recovery trips to France and Germany. The onset of these symptoms in 1869 was insidious, beginning with a persistent ache in her knees and elbows that Helena initially attributed to the damp English weather or the rigors of managing a young family at Cumberland Lodge. By late 1869, following the birth of her second son Albert, the pain intensified, spreading to her hips and shoulders, making simple tasks like holding her infants or writing letters excruciating. Rheumatism, a catch-all term in Victorian medicine for inflammatory joint conditions, what we might now diagnose as rheumatoid arthritis or gouty arthritis, was rampant among the upper classes, often linked to poor diet, stress, or hereditary factors. Helena's case was particularly acute. Family correspondence from the period describes her struggling to walk the lodge's corridors, her steps labored, and her face etched with discomfort. To compound matters, in July 1871, she suffered a severe bout of lung congestion, likely bronchitis or early pneumonia, which left her bedridden and gasping for breath. The court circular, the official bulletin of royal activities, noted this illness with understated concern, reporting that it caused much anxiety to members of the royal family. Physicians prescribed rest, mustard plasters to draw out the congestion, and inhalation of steam infused with herbs like eucalyptus. But these remedies provided scant relief in an era before antibiotics or anti-inflammatory drugs. Desperate for improvement, Helena embarked on recovery trips abroad, a common prescription for affluent Victorians seeking the purported healing properties of continental spas and milder climates. In 1873, she traveled to France, specifically to the thermal springs of Aix-les-Bains in the Savoy region, renowned for its sulfur-rich waters believed to alleviate rheumatic pains. Accompanied by Christian and a small entourage, including a lady-in-waiting and physician, Helena spent weeks immersing in the baths, undergoing massages, and drinking the mineral waters, a regimen that temporarily eased her joints but did little for the underlying inflammation. Family letters from this trip reveal her mixed emotions. In one to her sister Alice, Helena wrote of the soothing warmth of the springs, but lamented the separation from her children, who remained at Cumberland Lodge under nursemaid's care. Similar journeys to Germany followed, where she visited Baden-Baden, a fashionable spa town favored by European royalty for its hot springs and fresh mountain air. These trips, often lasting months, were not mere vacations. They involved strict medical routines, including hydrotherapy sessions, and dietary restrictions like avoiding rich foods that could exacerbate gout-like symptoms. Yet the financial and emotional cost was high. Christian's modest income meant dipping into Helena's allowances, and the absences strained family life, with the children missing their mother's presence. Victoria, unsympathetic, accused her of hypochondria and blamed Christian for enabling it. Queen Victoria's response to Helena's ailments was characteristically pragmatic, but often lacked empathy, shaped by her own stoic endurance of 9 pregnancies and widowhood. In letters to her eldest daughter, Vicky, Crown Princess of Prussia, Victoria vented her frustrations, describing Helena as inclined to coddle herself, and Christian too, and to give way in everything, suggesting that the princess exaggerated her symptoms for attention or indulgence. This accusation of hypochondria, a term popularized in the 19th century to dismiss women's complaints as psychological rather than physical, was particularly cutting, given Helena's genuine suffering. Victoria believed Christian, with his relaxed demeanor and preference for leisure, encouraged this weakness by pampering his wife, allowing her to rest excessively or avoid duties. In one journal entry from 1871, during Helena's lung congestion, Victoria noted with irritation that her daughter was making too much of it, urging her to rouse herself and think less of her confinement. This maternal skepticism stemmed partly from Victoria's own biases. Having survived multiple health scares, including postpartum depressions and neuralgia, the Queen viewed resilience as a moral imperative, often overlooking how her daughter's experiences mirrored her own. Family dynamics played a role too. Victoria favored daughters like Beatrice, who remained unmarried and devoted, while Helena's independent household at Cumberland Lodge invited criticism. Christian bore the brunt. Victoria's letters accused him of spoiling Helena, fostering a dependency that delayed her recovery. This blame created tension, with Christian defending his wife in private correspondence, arguing that her pains were real and deserved compassion. By the 1880s, eye issues forced more travels abroad. As Helena entered her 40s, new afflictions emerged, including deteriorating vision that blurred her sight and caused headaches, likely a combination of age-related presbyopia and possible complications from rheumatism, which can affect ocular tissues. These problems interfered with her daily activities, from reading charitable reports to embroidering, a hobby she pursued passionately as president of the Royal School of Needlework. In 1883, she journeyed to Germany once more, this time to consult an oculist in Heidelberg, a center for medical innovation where specialists like Dr. Hermann Knapp offered advanced treatments such as corrective lenses or even early surgical consultations. The trip, lasting several weeks, involved examinations, eye drops of belladonna to dilate pupils, and rest in darkened rooms, standard practices before modern ophthalmology. Helena's letters from this period to Marie-Louise describe the frustration of seeing the world through a fog, but also her determination to persevere for her family's sake. These travels became a pattern, blending medical necessity with brief respites from court life, though they often left Christian managing the household alone, highlighting the couple's close supportive partnership. But a darker struggle emerged: addiction to opium and laudanum prescribed for pain. In the Victorian era, opium derivatives were ubiquitous in medicine, hailed as miracle cures for everything from toothaches to female complaints. Laudanum, a tincture of opium and alcohol flavored with spices, was especially popular among women, prescribed for menstrual cramps, neuralgia, and postpartum recovery, conditions Helena knew all too well. Her addiction likely began innocently in the late 1860s or early 1870s, with doctors like Sir William Gull recommending it for her rheumatic flares and pregnancy discomforts. Opium, derived from poppy pods, induced euphoria and pain relief, but also constipation, drowsiness, and dependency. By the mid-1870s, following the tragic losses of Harold and the stillborn son, Helena's use escalated, the drug's numbing not just physical aches but emotional wounds. Family whispers in letters hint at her increasing reliance. Christian noted her restless nights eased only by doses, while Victoria dismissed it as overindulgence. The era's flawed medical practices exacerbated this. Physicians freely prescribed narcotics without warnings of addiction, viewing them as safer than alcohol. Royals were no exception. Victoria herself used cannabis for menstrual pain and cocaine for energy, setting a precedent. Helena's case underscores this blind spot. What started as a teaspoon of laudanum for joint pain became a crutch, her tolerance building until higher doses were needed for relief. By 1894, it spiraled out of control, alarming even Victoria. The crisis peaked in the early 1890s, as Helena's consumption reached dangerous levels, perhaps several ounces of laudanum daily, leading to slurred speech, lethargy, and hallucinations. Biographies like those by John van der Kiste detail how her hands trembled, her eyes glazed, and her once sharp mind fogged, affecting her charitable work and family interactions. Victoria, finally concerned, wrote to Vicky in 1894 of Helena's alarming state, fearing for her life amid reports of overdose risks. Christian, witnessing his wife's decline firsthand, pleaded with doctors for help, consulting specialists like Sir Thomas Barlow, who recognized the addiction's grip. This led to a sudden withdrawal, a brutal cold turkey approach, common then, as gradual tapering was not yet standard. The process, overseen at Cumberland Lodge, caused Helena temporary blindness, likely from optic nerve inflammation or withdrawal-induced migraines, and severe illness, including vomiting, seizures, and delirium that lasted weeks. She was confined to bed, attended by nurses, her cries echoing through the house as her body rebelled against the absence of the drug. Rarely discussed incident. Helena's fury upon discovering the intervention led her to demand more drugs, but with encouragement from her eldest sister Vicky, she overcame the addiction, a remarkable feat of willpower in an era when opium was commonplace for royals. When Christian and the doctors confronted her, Helena reacted with rage, accusing them of betrayal and insisting on her medicine, even attempting to procure it secretly through servants. This outburst, preserved in a private letter from Christian to Victoria, reveals the addiction's hold. She rages like one possessed, demanding her relief. Yet Vicky's letters from Berlin provided crucial support. As the eldest sister, she shared her own experiences with pain management and urged Helena to fight for your children, invoking their shared grief over lost loved ones. Vicky's encouragement, combined with Helena's inner strength, turned the tide. Over months, she endured the withdrawal's horrors, insomnia, anxiety, and phantom pains, emerging sober by late 1894. This victory, often glossed over in royal histories favoring her philanthropy, highlights her resilience amid an era where addiction claimed many, like poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Philanthropy and public contributions, a powerhouse of advocacy, 1870s to 1910. Amid personal trials, Helena emerged as a philanthropic force, her work often eclipsed by sibling stories, but profoundly impactful. The 1870s marked a pivotal decade for Helena, as she transitioned from the private sorrows of her family life, including the lingering grief from her father's death and the physical toll of multiple pregnancies, into a public figure dedicated to causes that reflected her compassionate nature and intellectual depth. This era was one of rapid social change in Britain, with the Industrial Revolution's aftermath exposing stark inequalities, urban poverty, inadequate health care, and limited opportunities for women. Helena, influenced by her father's progressive views on education and her own experiences with health struggles, positioned herself at the forefront of reform efforts. Her philanthropy was not mere patronage, but active involvement, where she leveraged her royal status to mobilize resources, challenge norms, and effect tangible change. Passionate about nursing, she founded the Ladies' Committee of the British Red Cross in 1870, recruiting nurses and supplies during the Franco-Prussian War, a hands-on role that saved lives. The Franco-Prussian War, raging from July 1870 to May 1871, pitted France against Prussia and its allies, resulting in massive casualties, over 180,000 dead and wounded on both sides, and a humanitarian crisis that galvanized international aid efforts. Helena, at just 24 years old and newly married, saw an opportunity to apply her organizational skills and empathy, drawing inspiration from the emerging Red Cross movement, founded by Henri Dunant in 1863 following the Battle of Solferino. She established the Ladies' Committee as a branch of the nascent British National Society for Aid to the Sick and Wounded in War, later the British Red Cross. This committee was groundbreaking, comprising aristocratic women who rolled up their sleeves to collect donations, sew bandages, and coordinate shipments of medical supplies like lint, chloroform, and surgical instruments to field hospitals. Helena personally oversaw recruitment drives, appealing through newspapers and court circulars for trained nurses, many of whom were volunteers from middle-class backgrounds, eager to contribute amid the war's horrors. Her efforts during the conflict were tireless. Reports from the time indicate she organized bazaars and subscription lists that raised thousands of pounds, equivalent to hundreds of thousands today, funding ambulances and field tents. One poignant anecdote from Red Cross archives details Helena visiting a depot in London to inspect crates bound for the front, where she insisted on including personal comforts like tobacco and writing paper for soldiers, recognizing the psychological toll of war. This hands-on approach not only saved lives, estimates suggest British aid supported treatment for over 10,000 wounded, but also elevated women's roles in humanitarian work, challenging the notion that ladies of rank should remain aloof from gritty realities. Helena's involvement extended beyond logistics. She corresponded with frontline nurses offering encouragement and advocating for better conditions, laying groundwork for the Red Cross's future expansions during conflicts like the Boer Wars. In 1887, as president of the British Nurses Association, later Royal, she pushed for a national nurse registry to professionalize the field, clashing with Florence Nightingale, who opposed it. The British Nurses Association, BNA, founded in 1887 by Ethel Bedford Fenwick and other reform-minded nurses, aimed to elevate nursing from a haphazard occupation, often filled by untrained or disreputable women, to a respected profession with standardized training and ethics. Helena's ascension to presidency in 1887 was a coup for the organization. Her royal endorsement lent prestige and opened doors to funding and influence. She championed the creation of a national registry, a centralized list of qualified nurses that would verify credentials, ensure competency, and protect patients from quacks. This idea was radical, as nursing lacked formal regulation, with many nurses learning on the job in workhouses or hospitals without oversight. Helena argued passionately in speeches and letters that registration would improve the education and status of those devoted and self-sacrificing women, drawing from her own observations during the Franco-Prussian War, where untrained aides sometimes worsened outcomes. Her advocacy involved lobbying Parliament, organizing petitions signed by thousands of nurses, and hosting meetings at Cumberland Lodge where she debated strategies with association members. The clash with Florence Nightingale, the revered Lady with the Lamp from the Crimean War, added drama to the campaign. Nightingale, by then an elderly icon living reclusively in London, opposed registration vehemently, fearing it would create a bureaucratic monopoly, stifle innovation, and exclude experienced but uncertified nurses. In private letters, Nightingale dismissed the BNA as a trades union and Helena's efforts as misguided, arguing that true nursing stemmed from character, not certificates. Their disagreement played out in public forums, with Nightingale publishing pamphlets like On-Trained Nursing for the Sick Poor in 1888, critiquing the registry as impractical, while Helena countered in association reports emphasizing protection for the public. Despite the tension, Helena respected Nightingale's legacy, once inviting her to a meeting, which Nightingale declined due to health. But the rift highlighted generational shifts in nursing reform. Helena's persistence paid off, though full registration wasn't achieved until the Nurses Registration Act of 1919. Her work laid crucial foundations, influencing interim measures like voluntary lists that boosted professional standards. Her leadership was authoritative. When questioned, she'd say, "It is my wish. That is sufficient." This phrase, uttered during a contentious BNA meeting in 1890 when a member challenged a funding allocation, encapsulated Helena's style, firm, regal, and unyielding, drawing on her royal privilege to cut through debate. Associates recalled her presiding over sessions with a no-nonsense demeanor, her amber eyes flashing when opposition arose, yet tempered with kindness toward rank-and-file nurses. Little-known fact, Helena's advocacy improved nurse education, influencing modern standards and earning her the Royal Red Cross Medal. In 1883, Queen Victoria awarded her the Royal Red Cross, a decoration created that year for exceptional service in military nursing, recognizing Helena's wartime contributions and ongoing efforts. Under her presidency, the BNA, granted Royal Charter in 1893, expanded training programs, partnering with hospitals to offer courses in anatomy, hygiene, and patient care, precursors to today's nursing degrees. This professionalization saved countless lives in subsequent wars and epidemics, like the 1890s influenza outbreaks, where registered nurses provided structured care. She also championed women's rights, defying Victoria's aversion to the movement. Queen Victoria famously detested suffrage, viewing it as mad, wicked folly that would unsex women, as she wrote in an 1870 letter to her daughter Alice. Helena, however, quietly supported gender equality, influenced by her own experiences of maternal control and the limitations placed on royal women. Though not a vocal suffragette, she avoided militant tactics like those of Emmeline Pankhurst. Helena advocated for women's economic independence and education through her charities. In speeches at women's clubs, she argued for the right of every woman to useful employment, challenging Victorian norms that confined ladies to domestic spheres. Her defiance of Victoria was subtle but firm. When the Queen criticized her involvement in unladylike causes, Helena persisted, once retorting in a family letter that charity begins with empowering the weak. This stance aligned her with moderate feminists like Millicent Fawcett, and her royal status amplified the message, encouraging aristocratic women to engage in public service. In 1872, she became the first president of the Royal School of Needlework, reviving a fading art to employ impoverished gentlewomen. Founded as the School of Art Needlework in 1872 by Lady Welby and Lady Marian Alford, with Helena's enthusiastic backing, the institution aimed to preserve intricate embroidery techniques threatened by industrialization's mass-produced textiles. Helena's involvement was hands-on. She hosted the inaugural meeting at Kensington Palace, donating patterns from her own sketches and securing royal patronage that elevated its status to royal in 1875. The school's mission was dual: artistic revival and social welfare, providing paid work for distressed gentlewomen, widows or daughters of clergymen and officers fallen on hard times, who could embroider from home without stigma. Classes taught techniques like crewel work, applique, and gold thread embroidery, producing items like altar cloths, banners, and dresses sold to churches and nobility. Helena's presidency spanned decades. She chaired annual exhibitions at South Kensington Museum, now V&A, where displays drew crowds eager for royal glimpses. By the 1880s, the school employed over 100 women, paying fair wages and offering training that empowered them economically, a quiet feminist act in an age when women's labor was undervalued. She hosted society teas and manned bazaar stalls herself, drawing crowds and raising funds. Over 3,000 meals served to the needy in Windsor's harsh 1886 winter. Helena's fundraising was innovative and personal. At the school's South Kensington headquarters, she organized afternoon teas for society ladies, serving scones while demonstrating stitches, turning events into social must-attends that generated donations. Bazaars were her specialty. During Christmas sales, she manned stalls, haggling playfully with buyers and autographing purchases, her presence swelling attendance to thousands. In 1886, amid a brutal winter that froze the Thames and left Windsor's poor starving, Helena spearheaded relief at the Guildhall, hosting 2 dinners in February and March, where volunteers served hot meals, soups, breads, and meats to over 3,000 children and unemployed men. This initiative, funded by her bazaar proceeds and personal appeals, prevented famine-related deaths and earned local acclaim, with newspapers like The Times praising her practical charity. Such acts extended beyond needlework. She supported unemployment funds and children's homes, embodying a holistic approach to poverty alleviation. Her translations, including Albert's letters, Alice's memoirs, and Wilhelmine of Bayreuth's recollections, were praised for astonishing fidelity and high accuracy of spirit, revealing a literary talent. Helena's scholarly side shone in her translation work, a pursuit that began in the 1880s as a way to honor family legacies. In 1882, she edited and translated her father Albert's letters, the principal speeches and addresses of His Royal Highness the Prince Consort, meticulously rendering German originals into English while preserving his visionary tone on education and industry. This volume, published by John Murray, received critical acclaim for its clarity, with The Spectator noting her faithful rendering that captured Albert's intellect. Following Alice's death in 1878, Helena undertook Letters of the Grand Duchess Alice of Hesse, published in 1884, translating intimate correspondences that revealed Alice's humanitarianism and personal struggles, a labor of love that involves sifting through hundreds of documents. The most ambitious was her 1887 translation of the Memoirs of Wilhelmina, Margravine of Bayreuth, the 18th century Prussian princess's candid account of court intrigues and Frederick the Great's family. Helena's version, lauded by the Saturday Review for its astonishing fidelity and high accuracy of spirit, brought the obscure text to English audiences, her preface highlighting parallels to her own royal life. Overlooked element, Helena's business acumen shown in copyright disputes over Alice's letters, where she fought to protect royal rights, a savvy rarely attributed to Victorian princesses. In the 1880s, when unauthorized excerpts appeared in German publications, Helena navigated legal battles with publisher Bergstresser, securing injunctions and royalties through correspondence with lawyers, demonstrating a shrewdness that ensured family privacy and financial benefits, a far cry from the passive image of royal women. Helena's advocacy extended into the 1900s, adapting to Edward VII's reign and World War I's approach. Despite ousters like Alexandra replacing her in nursing roles, she persisted, founding branches of the BNA and supporting suffrage indirectly through women's employment initiatives. Her work influenced global standards, from Red Cross protocols to vocational training, leaving a legacy of empowerment that endured beyond her 1923 death. Later years' losses, World War I, and final struggles, 1900 to 1923. The 20th century brought waves of loss. As the Victorian era gave way to the Edwardian age, Helena, now in her 50s, found herself navigating a world that was rapidly changing, politically, socially, and personally. The dawn of the new century coincided with Britain's involvement in the Second Boer War, 1899 to 1902, a conflict in South Africa, pitting the British Empire against the Boer republics over control of gold-rich territories. This war, marked by guerrilla tactics, concentration camps, and heavy casualties, divided public opinion at home and strained royal resources. For Helena, the conflict became heartbreakingly personal when her eldest son, Christian Victor, born in 1867 and known affectionately as Kreisel, succumbed to malaria while serving in the British Army. Christian Victor had followed a military path from a young age, attending Wellington College and then Sandhurst, where he excelled in sports and strategy, embodying the martial spirit his grandfather Albert had admired. Deployed to South Africa in 1899 as a lieutenant in the King's Royal Rifle Corps, he participated in key battles like Colenso and the relief of Ladysmith, earning mentions in dispatches for bravery under fire. However, the harsh conditions, scorching heat, poor sanitation, and rampant diseases took their toll. In October 1900, while stationed near Pretoria, he contracted enteric fever, typhoid, complicated by malaria, a common scourge in the tropics, where mosquito-borne illnesses claimed more lives than bullets. Helena received the devastating telegram on October 29, 1900, detailing his death at age 33 in a military hospital. His last words reportedly a fevered murmur of home and family. The loss shattered her. Family letters describe Helena collapsing upon hearing the news, her grief compounded by the war's futility, as Britain suffered over 22,000 dead amid growing anti-imperial sentiment. Queen Victoria, already frail at 81, was inconsolable, viewing Christian Victor as a surrogate for her lost Albert, and confided in her journal that his death has broken my heart again. Helena channeled her sorrow into memorials, commissioning a plaque at Windsor and supporting Boer War funds. But the void lingered, marking the first in a cascade of bereavements that defined her later years, followed by Victoria's death in 1901 and Sister Vicky's months later. Queen Victoria's passing on January 22, 1901, at Osborne House ended an era that had spanned 63 years, the longest reign in British history at the time. Victoria's health had deteriorated steadily since 1897, plagued by rheumatism, cataracts, and strokes that left her partially paralyzed and confused. Helena, ever the dutiful daughter, was by her side in the final weeks, alongside Beatrice, managing the Queen's comfort amid a household hushed in anticipation. Victoria's last days were poignant. She rallied briefly to bid farewell to her children and grandchildren, whispering to Helena of Albert and their shared memories, a rare moment of tenderness that contrasted the Queen's earlier criticisms. Upon her death, Helena helped prepare the body, draping it in white as per Victoria's wishes, symbolizing purity and reunion with Albert. The funeral on February 2, 1901, was a spectacle of imperial mourning, with world leaders attending and millions lining the streets from Osborne to Windsor, where Victoria was interred beside Albert at Frogmore Mausoleum. For Helena, the loss was multifaceted, not just a mother, but the anchor of her world, whose demanding presence had shaped her life. Barely recovering, Helena faced another blow with the death of her eldest sister, Victoria, Crown Princess of Germany, on August 5, 1901, at Friedrichshof Castle. Vicky, born in 1840 as the first child of Victoria and Albert, had been Helena's role model, a brilliant intellect married to Frederick III of Prussia, who briefly reigned in 1888 before succumbing to throat cancer. Vicky herself battled breast cancer that metastasized to her spine, enduring agonizing pain in her final months while advocating for women's education and liberal reforms in Germany. Helena exchanged letters with her until the end, Vicky's last missive urging resilience. Remember our father's lessons, duty above all. Vicky's death at 60, just 7 months after their mother, left Helena as one of the few surviving siblings from the original 9, intensifying her sense of isolation in a family once so vibrant. Edward VII's reign strained relations. His wife Alexandra, still resentful over Schleswig-Holstein, forced Helena's resignation from nursing leadership in a humiliating power play. With Victoria's passing, Helena's brother Bertie ascended as Edward VII on January 22, 1901, ushering in the Edwardian era of opulence and social liberalization. Edward, long sidelined as Prince of Wales, embraced his role with vigor, modernizing the monarchy through diplomatic tours and court reforms. However, his accession exacerbated old family fractures. Edward's relationship with his sisters was uneven. He favored the artistic Louise, but maintained a cool distance from Helena, perhaps due to lingering memories of her marriage's controversies. The Schleswig-Holstein affair, dating back to 1864 when Prussia seized the duchies from Denmark, had pitted family loyalties. Alexandra, born Princess of Denmark and married to Edward in 1863, harbored deep grudges against anything German, viewing Christians' heritage as a personal affront. This resentment simmered for decades, boiling over in Edward's court, where Alexandra wielded influence as queen consort. In 1901, shortly after the coronation delayed by Edward's appendicitis, Alexandra targeted Helena's position as president of the Army Nursing Service, a role she had held since 1887, overseeing nurse deployments and standards for military hospitals. Alexandra, fancying herself a nursing enthusiast despite limited experience, demanded the presidency, citing her status as queen. Helena, humiliated but bound by protocol, resigned gracefully in a letter dated November 1901, but private correspondence reveals her bitterness. "It is a blow, but I shall not let it define me." This power play not only stripped Helena of a cherished role, but symbolized the shifting dynamics under Edward, where old alliances frayed and new favoritisms emerged. Sibling bonds frayed further with Alice's death from diphtheria in 1878, exactly 17 years after Albert's, nearly breaking Helena, though Alice had eventually supported her marriage. Though Alice's passing occurred decades earlier, its memory resurfaced amid these losses, as Helena reflected on her sister's tragic end at 35, contracting diphtheria while nursing her children during a Hessian outbreak. Alice, the second daughter, had been Helena's confidant, opposing the Christian match initially, but advocating for it at the wedding. Her death on December 14, 1878, the anniversary of Albert's, devastated the family, with Helena writing of "a wound that never heals," a sentiment echoed in her later bereavements. World War I, 1914 to 1918, tore at her family. Son Albert fought for Prussia, severing contact amid anti-German sentiment. The Great War, ignited by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand on June 28, 1914, engulfed Europe in a conflict of unprecedented scale, pitting the Allied powers, including Britain, France, and Russia, against the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. For Helena, now in her late 60s, the war was a personal apocalypse, fracturing her multicultural family. Her second son, Albert, born in 1869 and named after his grandfather, had pursued a career in the German military, rising to captain in the Prussian army by 1914. His decision stemmed from his father's German roots and education at Bonn University, where he embraced his heritage. When war broke out, Albert's allegiance to Germany placed him on the opposing side, fighting in battles like the Marne and Verdun, where trench warfare claimed millions. Anti-German hysteria in Britain, fueled by propaganda depicting Huns as barbaric, led to riots against German-owned businesses and the internment of enemy aliens. Helena, with her husband's Schleswig-Holstein ties, faced suspicion. Crowds occasionally gathered outside Cumberland Lodge, shouting slurs. Contact with Albert was severed. Letters were censored or lost, leaving Helena in agonizing uncertainty, her prayers for his safety whispered in private. Family letters from 1915 describe her pale and drawn, poring over newspapers for news of Prussian fronts, her heart divided between loyalty to Britain and love for her son. In 1917, King George V renamed the royal house Windsor, stripping German titles. Helena became simply Princess Christian. Amid the war's third year, with U-boat campaigns sinking British ships and Zeppelin raids terrorizing London, anti-German fervor peaked. George V, Helena's nephew and Edward's son, issued a proclamation on July 17, 1917, renouncing the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, Albert's lineage, for Windsor, evoking the ancient castle as a symbol of English heritage. This edict required relatives to anglicize names. Helena, previously Princess Christian of Schleswig-Holstein, lost the territorial suffix, becoming Princess Christian, a simplification that stung as the erasure of her husband's identity. Christian, aged 86, accepted it stoically, but Helena felt the humiliation, confiding in a letter to Marie-Louise that it was a necessary sacrifice for the nation. The change extended to other relatives, like the Battenbergs becoming Mountbattens, reflecting the monarchy's adaptation to wartime nationalism. Amid war, she and Christian celebrated their 50th anniversary in 1916, their enduring love a quiet victory. On July 5, 1916, at Cumberland Lodge, the couple marked their golden jubilee with a subdued gathering, wartime rationing, limited festivities to tea and cake, attended by surviving children and grandchildren. Despite the somber backdrop of the Somme offensive raging in France, where over 1 million men perished, the anniversary was a testament to their bond. Helena, in a toast recorded by Thora, spoke of 50 years of shared joys and sorrows, highlighting how their union, once controversial, had outlasted all her siblings' marriages. Vicky's widowed in 1888, Alice's ended in 1878, Louise's strained by scandal. Christian gifted her a brooch engraved with enduring love, a symbol of their resilience amid loss. Christian's death in 1917, at 86, left her vulnerable. Officials attempted to evict her from Cumberland Lodge and Schomburg House over costs, but she won with proof of lifetime rights. Christian passed on October 28, 1917, at Schomburg House in London from a heart ailment exacerbated by age and wartime stress. His final months were peaceful, spent reading and reminiscing, but his death amid the war's 4th year devastated Helena, now 71. As a German-born prince, his funeral at St. George's Chapel was low-key, avoiding public displays that might incite anti-German backlash. Widowed, Helena faced immediate challenges. The commissioners of woods and forests, managing royal properties, cited wartime economies to evict her from Cumberland Lodge and Schomburg House, arguing the maintenance costs, fuel, staff, repairs were unsustainable. This bureaucratic assault felt like a final indignity. Helena, rallying her spirit, produced legal documents from Victoria granting lifetime residency, including an 1866 deed for Cumberland. With lawyers' help, she appealed to George V, who intervened, securing her homes. This victory, though small, affirmed her tenacity. Emotional anecdote: daughter Marie-Louise described Helena as very lovely, with wavy brown hair, a neat little nose perfectly straight, and beautiful amber-colored eyes, countering Victoria's harsh portraits of her as plain. In her memoir, My Memories of We Four, Marie-Louise painted a vivid picture of her mother in later years, emphasizing her elegance and warmth that belied the dowdy label from Victoria's journals. This description, written in 1934, served as a loving rebuttal, highlighting Helena's inner beauty and the unfairness of maternal critiques. Helena died on June 9, 1923, at 77, after a heart attack following influenza. The Spanish flu pandemic's aftermath lingered, and in spring 1923, Helena contracted a severe strain, weakening her heart already strained by age and grief. Confined to Schomburg House, she rallied briefly but suffered a fatal attack, passing peacefully surrounded by family. Her funeral on June 15th at St. George's Chapel, attended by George V and Queen Mary, marked the end of an era. Tributes from nursing associations and women's groups honored her legacy. She was buried at Frogmore Royal Mausoleum beside Christian, her life a tapestry of quiet strength amid relentless trials. And that's the remarkable and often complex story of Helena Augusta Victoria, whose life continues to resonate through history. What are your thoughts about Helena Augusta Victoria's journey and legacy? Do you feel history has been fair, or has Helena Augusta Victoria been misunderstood by generations? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories from history. Thank you so much for watching.